Good morning, welcome in. We will get started in just a moment. Make yourselves comfortable. And a few housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, I want to welcome you to the 2025 UC Riverside Staff Conference, welcoming not only our UC Riverside colleagues and staff, but also colleagues and peers from our sister campuses throughout the UC system. We're thrilled to have you join us today. A few helpful notes in case you've never attended an event on Zoom events before. Even though today is day 2 of the conference, we want to make sure everyone is aware that each session is being recorded and will be posted on UC Riverside's Staff Assembly YouTube channel. Our keynote presentations from yesterday and this morning will also be stored in the UC Riverside learning management system. For those of you who are not Riverside staff, you can access the keynote presentations through the Zoom events page until April 25th, I believe. After that, you will no longer have access to those unless you are a Riverside staff employee. If you would like closed captioning for our session today, please click on the Show Closed Captions button at the bottom of your screen. And we will be using chat to interact today. So if you want to interact using the chat, we will keep watch on that. I will also do my best to watch for any questions you might have and answer them as I am able. So let's give it maybe one more moment here to allow folks to join us. I know several of you are coming from the previous sessions. Again, welcome in. We're going to get started in just a moment. All right. So I think we're looking good with our attendees here. So what do you say we go ahead and get started with the session? As always, please be mindful of UC Riverside's principles of community. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to all of you Alexandra Rollins. Alexandra Rollins is a leadership consultant with 10 years of experience working with companies such as Toyota, Mattel, Hyundai, AAA, and here at UC Riverside. She helps organizations improve performance through leadership strategies. Alexandra holds a bachelor's in psychology from UC Riverside, so she is also an alum here, and a master's in industrial organizational psychology from Alliant International University. Fun fact, Alexandra loves UC Riverside because it's where she grew as a student, and she's passionate about giving back to the campus community, doing so even just as late as last night. So she's very busy. She currently also serves as UC Riverside's Director of Employee and Organizational Development. So she, in fact, is my director for my position as well. And I am so thrilled and honored to be on her team. So with that, you are all in good hands, and I am so excited to introduce you once again to Alex Rollins. Alex, take it away.
Yes, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Joanna. I'm really excited to have you all here. And to really get us started, I want us to be in the right mindset for this session. So I want to take you back on a journey with me. And we're actually going to go to a journey back to my high school days. To be more specific, back to my high school soccer playing days. So I played soccer and had a great time, played all throughout high school, but I've also been in a lot of sports prior to then. When I started my soccer, I don't want to say career because I played only for 4 years, but when I started on my soccer team as a freshman at La Sierra High School, we had incredible players. We had some players that were lightning fast. We had others that could just look at the goal, and then that ball would just go right in. We had some amazing footwork. I didn't even know where that came from some of these from some of these players. But here's the thing, even though we had such great players on this team, we kept losing games. Why? Because we weren't playing as a team. One of our best players always wanted to take the final shot. I remember this, she always had this incredible skill of wherever she was at, she would always just take the shot. Even when maybe someone else that was closer to the goal, maybe that person would have been better to take the shot if she just would have passed it, right? We had another team player that was always putting in the extra effort. This player stayed late, she stayed after practice, she worked hard. But here's the thing, even though she was working so hard on the team, she wasn't one of our best players, but she had the heart. I remember my coach would always say, "You have so much heart." And then there was a player who had so much talent. I think she would sleep and then she would make a goal in her sleep. But you know what? She wasn't pushing herself. She wasn't one of our strongest players, but she never gave it her all. So again, what did we realize? We played as individuals. We weren't playing as a team. And I will never forget the day that our coach sat us down. He challenged us to focus not only on our strengths, but what the team really needed. And we learned a lot through that. The ball hog learned to pass, right? The hardest worker learned to be more aware of the team's strategy. She learned about positioning. The naturally gifted player starting putting in more effort. And guess what? With that shift in our mentality, in our mindset, we started winning more games. And so ever since then, I've always been really interested in teamwork, in team sports, because it's always been a part of my life. And so I wanted to take you back on that journey. And in case y'all are wondering, that's me, number 10. That was my favorite number. But I want to fast forward to today. My husband and I coach our two little girls, and they are playing soccer as well. One of them is 5 years old and the other one is 7 years old. And here's what we emphasize. It's not about who scores the most goals. It's about really lifting each other up. It's always about giving your best effort, no matter the situation. It's how can you learn to communicate, encourage, and support your teammate. So our biggest goal is teaching them how to be really good teammates to each other. So whether it's on the soccer field, in the workplace, or even in your family dynamic, great teams don't just happen by accident. They are made up of great teammates. So I really, before we get into this session, I really want you all to just pause for a second, and I want you to think about what makes the best teammate you've had, right? Whether it's a sports team, at work, or even in life. What makes a great teammate? And just go ahead and you can come off mute. I like to have really interactive sessions, or you can go ahead and put it in the chat. I learned that there's a pop-up feature on the chat channel, so I do have it on my other screen. But really think about that. What makes a great teammate? And how do you put those values into those people, right? Yes, trustworthy communication, responsible communication, respect, humility. I love that. Trust, that's a big one, right? The fact that you're able to be with someone that you know that they're going to be there, they're going to show up. That is what I'm teaching my kids. And if you're looking at the pictures here on my screen, so Ava's team is the green team. She's my 5-year-old. They're called the Astro Blasters from the Disney ride. We're a big Disney family. And then you have Natalia's team, who is the team in the red. They're the web slingers from also Disneyland. And I'm in the middle. I'm actually not a coach of the team. I'm the team mom, because obviously I'm responsible for the snacks and the organization of the sports. But again, it's one of the biggest things that I really enjoy doing in the soccer field is really teaching, raising these kids on how to become great team players. So now that we have all these wonderful things in the chat, I really feel like let's go ahead and dive into that question. I can almost guarantee you that everything that people put into this chat is going to be the words that I'm going to give you in the $1,000,000 question. What makes an ideal team player? You can almost guarantee that successful teams have individuals who demonstrate at least one of these 3 virtues. So I want to go ahead and share those virtues. And before I get into those virtues, if you like what you hear in this session today, I want to point you out to Patrick Lencioni's book. This is where I got the virtues, and the book is called The Ideal Team Player. So use it as a resource, continue to, like, let's say if it resonates with you, continue to do more research on there. There's a lot of information in the book, and he tells it through a story. So I want to go ahead and introduce you to those virtues. The virtues are hungry, humble, and smart. So this brings me to Patrick Lencioni's idea of the ideal team player, someone who is humble, hungry, and smart. No matter the team, a sports team, a work group, or even a family unit, these 3 core qualities are consistently found in great teammates. So what does that mean? When I first looked at it, I remember seeing the list and I said, well, that's kind of obvious, right? There's a lot of great team qualities that a team member can have. But what does it mean? What does it really mean to be humble? And how does that translate into this work environment and even this team environment? So let's go ahead and jump into our first one, which is humility. C.S. Lewis quotes, "True humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less." So again, humble, the foundation of collaboration. And one of the things that I've learned is that this is the most important virtue. Great team players who lack, or I'm sorry, great team players lack excessive ego or concern about their status. They don't care. They are quick to point out the contributions of other people. They're slow to seek attention of their own, and they share credit. They emphasize team over self and define success collectively rather than individually. So really think about that. What does that mean? I have the honor of leading a great team on UCR's campus. I can't tell you, this team is always looking out for each other. They're always giving credit. They're always giving shout outs to each other. They're so humble. They're such a humble team. And even when you say, hey, you did an excellent job on such and such, whatever it was, it's like, oh, well, thank you. And they kind of move on. They don't even want to take that credit because they're such humble people. So I've seen this in action, and I can agree that I feel like it's a very important virtue. And as a leader, it is so important to see it in a team dynamic when people are lifting each other up and building each other up. And even on the soccer field, when I'm able to see kids that are 4 and 5 who don't really know how to play soccer. I don't know what they're doing out there. I don't know. I think they're just running around in circles or something. But they're not knowing how to really play the sport. But you know what? They're building each other up. And it just warms my heart to see people being humble, having that humility, and really teaching them that at such a young age. So I want you to think of a teammate who embodies humility. What do they do that makes them stand out? Really think about that. Because sometimes when we're in teams, or sometimes if we're a leader of a team, I really want you to understand if these are really the 3 virtues of an ideal team player, how can I recognize these virtues in my team for what they are, and how can I recognize that? So we have humility. Think of a teammate who embodies humility. What do they do that makes them stand out? And even if you want to go deeper with that question, how does it make you feel when you have team members on your team that have humility? So I'll go ahead and pause there. And Trina, I'm with you. Yes, I miss those soccer days as well. I'm glad that I'm doing it with my kids, and it's crazy busy because Friday nights, that's all it is. It's soccer, going from one game to the next. So Olga says you feel cared for. Yeah, you feel valued, right? Like someone is actually taking the, I guess, acknowledging, right? They're taking the opportunity to acknowledge your efforts, like, hey, you did a really good job. You know, imagine being with someone that lacked humility. How does that look like? And we're going to talk about that as well. You feel appreciated. They tend to be more interested in other than themselves, right? And you know what? When you have these qualities, your team just works better and better. The team, whether it's a soccer team, your work team, you're going to see it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be putting these virtues, and we're going to answer the hard questions. Well, what happens if you have a team member that has all 3? Great. What happens if you only have a team member that has 1? How do you build it? What happens if you have a team member that only has 2 of the qualities? How do you build that 3rd one? And then to answer that question, can you always be the ideal team player? Well, we're human, right? So sometimes we might not always be in that middle team player ground because we're human, and maybe we're tired that day, or maybe we had a hard week, or maybe we had a hard month, or maybe something's happening. But really understanding this is what it means to be an ideal team player. So these are great responses in the chat. Pat says, and Patricia says empowered. Exactly. So that's what humility looks like. Now let's go ahead and take it into the next trait, which is the other virtue of hunger. The hunger to drive to succeed. Hungry people are always looking for more things to do, more things to learn, more responsibility, whatever it is, they're looking for it, right? Even if it has nothing to do with their job, they are looking for it and they just want to do it. They just take things on over and over and over again. Hungry people never have to be pushed by a leader to work harder because they're already self-motivated. It's already in there. So really think about those people on your team. Want to know something that they really, really dislike, something that they loathe? They loathe the idea that they might be perceived as slackers. These people are just so, well, I'm not going to be perceived as a slacker, so what am I going to do? I'm just going to work harder and just be super, super hungry. And one of the things that I will tell you, fun fact, when I was newer to my career, so 10, 15 years ago, I remember thinking I loved staying in the office late. I loved just working late hours, working hard. It was me. It was just who I was as a person. And then I got married, I had kids. And so that kind of changed a little bit, right? Your priorities change. So really identifying yourself, do you take the initiative and seek out challenges, or do you find yourself coasting at times? And what is your boundary with that? And if I were to ask you, and this is just a pure self-reflection question, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being less, 5 being the most, how hungry would you say you are in your current role? Just self-reflection, just think about that, right? Just think about that. If you want to put it in the chat, go for it. Think about that. I think these are really important questions to ask yourself, right? Where am I at? And have that honest evaluation. All right, and then we have the last virtue, smart. Not IQ, but I'm talking about people smarts. Out of all the virtues, this one needs probably the most clarification because it's not what it might seem. It is not about intellectual capacity. It means your emotional intelligence, your strong interpersonal skills. It's about being aware of your words. How do they affect others? How do they impact others? Reading social cues and communicating effectively, right? How it's one of those things where you need to have those people smarts in order to really be a good team player. Feel people with where they're at. Are you doing that as a leader? Are you doing that as a team member, right? Feel them where they're at. If someone is coming up to you and they're saying, oh my gosh, I have so much on my plate, I'm so burnt out, that is not the time to say, and by the way, can you do this task, right? Feel people where they're at. How do you recognize when someone is people smart on a team? So reflection question for you. Think about that. How would you recognize when someone is people smart on a team? What do they do for the team? What do they do for you? I love in the chat how I asked from 1 to 5 and we got some 10s. I see you. I see you all. I love it. Yes, Jody, they keep the work moving. They encourage others, right? They're there for them. Maybe there's a conversation. There was a long time ago, we had a conversation. We were doing this big team building, and one of my team members stopped the conversation and checked in on the person. Hey, wait, before we move on, are you doing okay? Because something happened here, but are you doing okay? Having the ability to just check in with people. Check in with people. Hey, before we get started, can we have this conversation first? That is what I call people smarts. And when you see it in action, it is the most beautiful thing to see. So now we have the 3 virtues, right? We have humble, hungry, and smart. So here's the $1,000,000 question. What happens when people are just strong in just one of these areas? And this is where I want to go ahead and put the warning, like warning lights, warning lights. I actually tried to do something cool in the PowerPoint and try to put the music from Top Gun, Welcome to the Danger Zone, but I couldn't figure it out. I'm challenged in PowerPoint, apparently. So I want to give you all a warning. These classifications that we're about to go into right now, they are reserved only for people who are significantly lacking in one or more of these 3 areas. As a leader, you need to understand and you need to be smart about how are you using these terms with your employees. And remember that the purpose of identifying these types is not to pigeonhole someone, but to really understand what makes an ideal team player. How can we recognize or develop them in our teams? Again, warning sign, labeling a team member, even in private, can be very damaging. So again, don't assign these labels to colleagues who are truly team players simply because maybe they're not as strong in one area. So for example, let's say you're very strong, you have a team player that's humble and hungry, but you're like, oh, they lack in emotional intelligence, so they're not smart. You don't want to say that. Maybe they're having a bad day, or like I said, a bad week, or maybe there's a bad time in their life. Again, these are not permanent characteristics of people, right? Rather, they're things that we can develop, and how can we continue to maintain them on a team? And maybe that's through conversations. And I'll go ahead and show you how to have those conversations if you want to have it with your team, or if you even want them to self-reflect on, how can you work on being more humble? How can you work on humility and really driving that force forward? How can you work on, developing that emotional intelligence? So one thing I will say before we go into the next couple of slides is all of these virtues, and what I love most about the book is that they can be developed. And yes, Shauna, you're absolutely right. They show up differently too, right? And so how does it look? So again, that's why I want to put that warning sign, because the last thing that we want to do in this session is you don't want to get out of here and start labeling people. You just want to say, okay, in my team, if I'm looking at my team as a whole, or even if you're an individual contributor, how does this show up in our work? And if you're having challenges in the team, how can we look at these components and make it work together? Just like the story that I shared with you with the soccer team. We were a team that had great players. We just weren't working together. And what happened? We made little tiny tweaks and we became a really stronger team. So again, I wanna make sure that I put a big warning sign on that before we get into it. All right, so now we're going to focus on a team member that has just one quality, because I want you to see how these qualities come together and how they align to make that ideal team player. So you have humble only. We call this the pawn. This is a person that's just humble only, that has lots and lots of humility. Patrick Lencioni calls these people who are humble only the pawn, because they lack hunger and smarts. They lack initiative and need to be told what to do. In the game of chess, a pawn is the least valuable piece on the board. And that's how his representation of this person is, right? This is a representation of how they are viewed on the team. While they don't stir the pot, they don't cause conflict, they don't feed into a collaborative, they just don't feed into that collaborative team. Ultimately, they're the person who stays quiet, they rarely contribute, but they're totally okay with being assigned work. They're going to do it, but they're not going to go above and beyond for that. So an example of this could be a team member who is always supportive, but never really takes the initiative. The challenge is that they are not going to push themselves, or they're not going to challenge others. They're just going to kind of stay stagnant, right? That's what it means to just be humble only. They're there, but they're not really disruptors of the team. Okay, so humble only. And if you all have any questions in the chat, I am monitoring the chat, so please go ahead and put it in there away. Hungry only. We call these people the bulldozers, right? Those who are only hungry are deemed as bulldozers, because bulldozers are designed to make way for new development, right? However, they can also be very disruptive, right? When people lack humility and smarts, their ego ends up plowing over everyone's ideas, and it could really be bad for team dynamics. So I hope that you're all seeing, hey, these virtues, if you have too much of that virtue, too much of a good thing, it can actually be a very bad thing for your team. So how do you develop them in a way where you are looking at everything and you have just the right amount? It's kind of like the three little bears, like one soup was hot, one soup was too cold. How do you get it just right? But again, when you have the bulldozer, yeah, they get a lot of things done. They get a lot of things done. They get a lot of projects done, but at what expense? People with this persona are very, sometimes could be very hard to work with. They're a very tough team member because they just want to get in, they want to get out, and all of a sudden there's all this damage control that needs to be done. So an example of this could be a team member who is always supportive, is taking that initiative, is kind of just my way or the highway, isn't really listening to the team. And the challenge is that you could affect morale, you can affect team dynamics in that way. So again, hungry only, how does that look? And then if you're a leader on this call, one thing that I want to also encourage you to do is, how can you take that virtue and how can you regulate it, right? Sometimes I know that we have to get the tasks done, right? But how can you get more ideas from your team? Hey, what do you all think about this? What do you all think about this idea? How can you maybe regulate your hunger in that capacity? So that's hungry, the bulldozer. And then we have smart. We call this in the book the charmer. When a person is only emotionally intelligent, they're called the charmers. While they provide a source of entertainment, they are a joy to be around. They're not really reliable because they lack humility and they lack hunger. They often think that maybe they're too good to take a certain task, and they kind of leave people in a bind. In the chat earlier, I asked the question, what makes an ideal team player? And a lot of people put reliability, trustworthy, right? These people they could be your best friend, but you can't really rely on these people that much because they're only there just for, just having fun and charming people. They end up really frustrating a team because they do have a poor work ethic. They might have, maybe they don't have, there's not too much attention that they need because they're contributing very, very, very little to the team. An example of this could be a coworker who is fun in meetings, but really avoids responsibility. Their charm lacks their productivity, their creativity, and it causes frustration. So they're there to have fun, but they're not really there to do the work. And I want you to think, yeah, when I was reading this book, there's times in my career where I even thought of myself, yeah, I was a total charmer. I remember I didn't understand the project, but man, everyone loved being around me. And that was it, right? I was able to get the job done and people liked me a lot, so I didn't really get into trouble, but I developed more and more in my career. So again, having just that one quality, it could be very troublesome when you're in that work setting. So again, Patrick Lencioni says, how do we have every one of these qualities and how can we regulate so that we have them all in one? Now, I want to go ahead and talk about, now that we've talked about just one virtue, so that's if you have one virtue, what happens if you have two of the three? Lencioni defines the 6 types of people there's people that are strong in 2 traits, but they're missing one. And so let's go ahead and break them down. So I didn't do it. I put it all in this triangle here so that you all can see what it means and what each one entails. So we're going to go ahead and go through them one by one. We have the first one called the accidental mess maker. So that is someone that is humble plus hungry, but not people smart. And if you look at my other chart, you're able to see how the 3 circles come together, the Venn diagram, and how they kind of overlap. So hopefully you're able to follow along with that. So when you have the accidental mess maker, what do you have? They work hard, they care about the team, but they're socially unaware. And so what happens to this person? They're unintentionally causing friction among the team. An example of this could be a well-meaning leader who speaks very bluntly to the team and doesn't realize the impact that it's making, right? We've seen this. We've been aware of this. We've probably seen this in our work environment, right? Someone that just talks a certain way, they don't know what the impact is that they're making. They lack that emotional intelligence. I mean, really take the time to think about it. I've had so many leaders in my days, some people that I said, wow, this leader is so smart with the technology, with the tools, but she's not emotionally aware. She's not emotionally smart. So we call that the accidental mess maker. So really, as we're going through this, think of those people. And I'm going to ask a powerful question at the end of it. So as we're going through this together. And then you have the next one, which is the skillful politician. Hungry plus smart, but not humble. All right, so think about that. And as we're going through this, think about how this could even come up or show up in your team. These people are ambitious and they're socially intelligent, but they lack humility, meaning they want to maybe manipulate situations, maybe for their own personal gain. An example of this could be a high-performing executive who networks well, but prioritizes personal success. The impact is they can be very effective, but are seen as self-serving or strategic rather than team-oriented, right? And they do it so well. And that's why we call them the skillful politician, because it all looks good on the outside, but are they really humble? Do they have that humility? A lot of times in our sessions, if you've taken leading at the speed of trust, working at the speed of trust, we talk about trust. And even with Patrick Lencioni's model, he talks about vulnerable trust. That's what it also means to be humble, is when you're vulnerable, when you're able to say, hey, I messed up, I made a mistake. It's not all about knowing all the answers or being completely strong in every single area. How can you be more humble? I remember growing up, my mom would always tell me, you have to be humble, show humility, be humble, right? Be thankful and be humble. And so that always just sticks in my mind. And then you have the third one, We call this person the lovable slacker. They're humble and smart, but they're not hungry. They are kind, they're socially aware, they're so easy to work with, but they lack drive. I mean, think about that. That was Mandy on the soccer team. This person was so good. I kid you not, she could be anywhere on the field with her eyes closed, and I kid you not, she would make a goal. I don't know how she did it, but she would just always make the goal. And then meanwhile, you have me that is over here running, just running so hard, practicing, doing all the things, and I would never make the goal. And I was a forward and she was a midfielder. So it was just one of those things where, wow, it just comes so natural to you. However, there was no hard work. There was none of that. And so again, an example is a charismatic team member who avoids hard work, but still gets it done. Maybe they're likable. The impact is they contribute minimally and they rely on their relationships with people rather than their effort. So really think about those people. Really think about those people. And when you really start putting them in these categories, you're like, huh. And maybe I've fallen in that trap, right? Maybe you're thinking, okay, where would you put yourself at? Maybe some of the team members, but remember, we did that warning for you. This is really purely for development. How do you get that team member to work in those certain areas? So out of these 6 team players, now that we have all 6 listed out here on the PowerPoint, have you worked with them before and how did it impact the team? So really think about them. Have you seen them now that we kind of have defined them? Have you worked with them before? Have you seen them? Did they impact the team in any way? Really think about those, and y'all can put it in the chat or you can come off mute, ask any questions. But I wanted to take a moment to really reflect about those 6 that we just identified. And I will be more with the question, which of these 6 team player types have you worked with before? How did they impact the team? Very loaded question. I love that, Trina. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So maybe they had one of the qualities and you're just like, oh, okay. I think teamwork, it's very interesting because when we talk about teamwork, when we talk about being teams, it's hard. I mean, it's one of those things where you are working in a group, we're all asked to do a task, we all have a mission that we're accomplishing. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different work ethics. But then we're called to work together on a team. And sometimes we have people that are really good at it. Sometimes we have people that are really not good team players. I want you all to think about for a moment, think about the high school days, think about the college days when your teacher said the dreaded words, this is a group project. Were you the one that liked it? Were you the one that hated it? You know, some of those things came up. And I remember when they had a group project, I always wanted to be with my team member who I trusted, who I knew was going to get the work done, right? And then sometimes you were placed with someone that maybe was the lovable slacker or someone that, you know, you thought they were working, but they're not. So we have some people have worked with all of them. Most of them had good intentions, but they weren't aware. Exactly. This is a lot of it. And we're going to go into that. A lot of it is about awareness too, is how can we be aware about their impact? How can we encourage them? I work for the politician. Yep. Misery. And it's all good on the outside, but on the inside and what they're doing to the team, big impacts, right? I can think of someone for each type. I think the most difficult is skillful politician because it seems like they actually care for people. Exactly. That one's the tricky one. And if you do get the book, that one is a tricky one. We have bulldozer. Yep. No one gets a chance to contribute. The person is just so hungry that it just takes over everything, right? And even in yourself, I know for me, sometimes I can be the bulldozer, right? I'm so hungry sometimes that it's like I just have to take the time to just pause and think and then have that team and team mentality, like, okay, we're doing this together as a team. The real world is yep. Yes, the real world is still a big group project. Exactly. How do we engage? How do we interact? Bulldozer, and is it, yeah, bullies at work, right? Because they're just like my way or the highway. So again, we've all are familiar with these people. We're all familiar with these types. So now my next reflection question for you all is the team impact. But in order to really understand the team impact, I want you to really take this internally. And I want you to think, which virtue helps a team the most? If you were just to pick one, which virtue do you think helps the team the most? So if you're leading a team, or maybe if you're the individual contributor on a team, which one would you say, out of all these virtues of humble, hungry, and smart, which one would you think helps the team the most? Hungry? Trick question. I don't know, Olga, maybe. I do a lot of trick questions for you all. Those of you that have taken my sessions. Smart, humble, being humble, hungry, smart. So we have a little bit of everything here. Yeah, and it is a trick question. The answer to that, it really depends. It depends on, well, where is the team at? What are the needs of the team? And what are we trying to accomplish, right? So it really depends, but the most important part for you is learning how to identify each, and then how can you help someone improve, or even in yourself, how can you improve in that area? Just like we did in that high school soccer team, right? The person that was not hungry realized, you know what, I'm actually hurting the team by not really giving it my all. So I'm going to give it my all. And that shifted things. The person that was just the bulldozer, right? I'm going to take the ball, and wherever I'm at, I'm just going to score it. She learned how to be that team player. The next question I have for you is, which virtue hurts a team the most when it's missing, right? So again, really another trick question. I mean, when any of these are missing, it can hurt the team. And that's the whole point that we're trying to make here, right? If you want to have a strong team, if you want to have a team full of ideal team players, you really want to focus on these three things, on these three virtues, so that you could continue to develop those, not only in yourself, but also in your team dynamics as well. So again, yep, it depends. So that's another trick question for you all as well. One of the great things that Patrick Lencioni does is he gives a self-reflection. And I do have some resources for you as well that I'm going to go ahead and put, or Joanna's going to go ahead and put in the chat at the end. And Joanna, if you want to even drop them in the chat right now, go ahead and feel free to. But one of them is a self-reflection. And this gives you the opportunity to assess yourself according to the three virtues, ranking them in order of your strongest, your next strongest, and your weakest. So I want to go ahead and take the time to do that here in this session, before you all actually take that self-assessment, because that's something that we can just do here in the session. I want you to remember one thing. No one is perfect in all the three virtues, and that's okay. What matters is self-awareness and a willingness to grow. Great teams and great individuals are made up of people who balance all three virtues. If you recognize a weakness, what I want to encourage you to do is take action. And I want you to remember that this is a journey. This is not a one-time reflection. Keep checking in with yourself and adjusting as you grow. And as you're going to see, whatever, maybe you're on a team, a sports team, a church team, whatever team you're on, those can even fluctuate depending on what your role is. So if I were to ask you right now, I want to give you about 2 minutes, and you don't have to put this in the chat. If you want to, you can. I won't not allow that. I want you to think, if you were to rank the three, which one would be your strongest, your next strongest, and then your weakness, or your weakest one? And I'll go ahead and start. So I can go ahead and share this example. And this is a great activity that you can also do in your team, and have the conversation. Again, it's all based on that vulnerability. So I will be vulnerable in front of all of you. So for me, I feel like I'm pretty hungry. I think my team would agree with that. I feel like if there's an opportunity, there's a way. Let's go ahead and get it done. Sometimes it's a little bit too much. I feel like I have good people smarts. I feel that I'm able to understand the temperature in the room. I can tell when someone's frustrated with me. I can tell when someone's happy with me. I can tell when someone's maybe not feeling themselves that day, or something's off. I can feel that. It's very interesting because my 5-year-old is very emotionally, she's very strong with her emotions. I can walk in one day, and if I'm not feeling good, she comes up to me and she puts her little hand on my chest and she says, "Mommy, are you feeling okay?" And she just knows. And meanwhile, my 8-year-old is, "What are we having for dinner?" Like, she doesn't even check in. It's the funniest thing. So yeah, for me, I would say I'm hungry. I have people smarts, and I can probably improve on my humility. I think I'm one of those people where I like recognition. I like being recognized for the work that my team does. I like being recognized for the work that I do. So really practicing more humility, I think that would only continue to make me a better leader, a stronger friend, a colleague. Those are the things that I'm working on, right? So that was me practicing in front of you. And I think it's really good to have these conversations with your teams and showing that vulnerability. When we talk about vulnerability and when we talk about trust, I often get the question of, well, can trust be fixed on a team? And the answer to that question is, number one, it depends. There has to be a willingness on both people. Both people have to want to work on that relationship. But the biggest thing that I always tell leaders is that the leader always has to go first. That's how you open the door. That's how you go into that situation. How can you model it as a leader? Is you have to go first. So if you want to see that humility on your team, how can you model it in your team? How can you model that hunger? How can you model that people smarts, right? So that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit here. So we have one brave person so far in the chat. So strongest is humility, then smarts, my weakest is hunger, just due to me being burnout. Exactly. But you know what? Your awareness, you're aware of it. And now you know, okay, you know what? Maybe asking that question, how is my lack of hunger in this situation? Is it hurting you or is it hurting the team? How can we be aware of that, right? And so having that honest conversation, that takes a lot of vulnerability. So thank you so much for sharing. We have a couple people, hunger, smart, then humble. Yep. Strongest is smart, second hungry, third is humble. I'm with you. So again,
Alex,
really, oh, go for it.
do you mind if could you answer the question that Nikki Effie posted?
Oh, sure. Let me go back to my chat here. Let's see. Okay, so we have a question. Would one's traits change based on the team dynamics? Yes. I would say yes on that one. And in the book, they have a really good chapter on based on the team, how you are going into that team and how you are showing up on that team. So for example, let's say if you are on a team that is hungry, they're getting done. And I'll use this as an example. When I was on UC Path, that team I would say was very, very hungry. It was a team of people that were just going in there and just getting the stuff done. And I would say the team probably lacked a little bit of the humility because we were just in there. And all those team players, I always say, and I look back at UC Path, wow, we got so much work done because of the nature of the culture. So I think it depends on culture. I think it depends on team environment. And I think it depends on how you're adjusting to all of that. So does that make sense a little bit? A little bit of sense? Okay, I got a thumbs up on that one. So yeah, it depends. Let's take a soccer team, a sports team. If you have a team that, let's say they're not hungry at all and they're not really putting in the work, putting in the effort, they're kind of just there, they're kind of coasting. It's going to be really hard to probably be hungry in that environment unless you have it internally. It's going to be really hard. I mean, that energy, we had a session yesterday called the energy bus. That energy that you have on the team, I say it's 100% contagious. And so it really depends on what the goal of the team dynamics is. All right. So here is, I wanted to share some quick strategies before we end our time here on strategies for growing into a team player. And a lot of people say, okay, well, how can I develop in these areas? And number one is humility. One way to strengthen your humility is by modeling it. We talked a little bit about that. As a leader, you need to demonstrate the qualities that you do value and you want to see more of. Show your team what it's like to serve with a humble heart. Teach them that servant leadership. Let it be known that that is the attitude and the status that you want to see in your organization, that you want to see in your team. That is something that for me, I try to remember. I truly, truly see leadership as a privilege. And when I have those hard days, because leadership is hard, when I have those hard days, I keep telling myself, you know what? It's a privilege. It's a privilege to be in this position. It's a privilege to lead this team. And I have to remind myself of that. It's not about, being like power hungry and then just having, just power over my team. Like that's not what it means for me. And so it's like, I'm always having those conversations, those internal conversations with myself. Maximize hunger. Employees without passion, I will tell you this, and hunger I feel like they're not maybe happy in their roles. I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, maybe they're burned out. I don't know. So maybe that's a bold statement there. But I did pick that out of the book. And that's what it said there. So I want to go ahead and talk about this when I talk about hunger. People want a purpose. They want a purpose. And one of the best ways to boost a person's hunger is to align it with their purpose and their organization. If you have someone on your team that is not hungry or doesn't show those signs of hunger, why? Get to the bottom of it. What made them join the company in the first place? One of the questions that I just did with my team just a couple of weeks ago is, why are you here? Like, why are you here? Why are you on this team? What is your purpose, right? And that's when you tie it to a vision. That's when they become that hunger, that hungry person. When did they lose the hope to serve? Where is the disconnect? What helped them? What will help them feel that their work has meaning? Meaning that they probably once had that purpose before. Maybe they're experiencing burnout. We saw that in the chat, right? We had someone that says, I feel like hungry is last because I'm burnt out. Another way to increase burnout is by providing that clarity. How can you make someone feel excited about the work? Maybe they need some direction. Maybe they need some inspiration. Maybe they need some motivation, or maybe they need a conversation with you about their workload. So again, you know, that hungry, I will say, I feel like employees need to have that to be an ideal team player. Obviously, you want to have the all three, but the leader, you want to go ahead and make sure that if you have someone that's missing that component, how can you develop that component? How can you get to the bottom of, hey, why are they so burnt out? What does this employee need in order for me to support them in the best way that I can? Because I will tell you, in sports teams, in work teams, in volunteer teams, it is so hard to work with someone that's not hungry. It's just really hard. It makes the work harder. It makes the work harder on the team. I even saw it on the soccer team, right? Where if you don't have people on the team that want it, that want to win, then why are we here? Why are we here? I once not managed, but coached a soccer team that they didn't even show up. Well, if they don't want to show up, then why do I want to show up? Why are we here, right? There was no willingness there. And that's really what hunger is all about. And then our last one here is strengthening smarts. To help employees increase their emotional intelligence, acknowledge the exact area that they need to grow in. Be honest and let them know how it impacts a team. For instance, this might look like saying something like, it becomes noticeable in meetings that you're very quick to make sarcastic and rude comments when someone disagrees with you. This has caused a rift on the team and the members are feeling it. How can we work together to make this and keep this a healthy environment, right? So really have that conversation. Hey, I noticed in the team, you responded in this way. Have the conversation. I can't tell you how many times people just don't want to have that conversation and they let it fester and then things get worse. So again, an example that I'll give you with Humble, I will ask for feedback on a project and really listen without being defensive. That's a great example of being humble. If someone says, hey, this work that you're doing is not up to expectations, you know, maybe that's me practicing humility. An example of being hungry, I will productively take on a task without waiting to be assigned. Hey, great, you're just taking it without being assigned. How are you helping your team if you do something like that? So again, it's not like you're moving the world here, right? You're not moving things to, to create, you're not changing yourself as a person. You're just maybe tweaking little things that you can do, not only support you, but even support your team. And then an example of being smart and working on that is I will practice pausing before speaking in meetings to make sure I'm considering other people's perspectives. So again, if you're working on one of the three, maybe those examples can resonate with you, but I want you to know that if there is one word that describes a virtue that you want to work on the most, start focusing on that one word. Maybe it's your humility, maybe it's your hunger, maybe it's your smart. And if it is hunger, because again, if you're working with someone that just doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to engage, how is that impacting the team? How is that impacting the team morale, even as an individual contributor? So I'm hoping that all this is really good info for you all. There is a couple things that I want to share in the chat, and one of them is the ideal team player self-ranking. It's a self-assessment, and if you are a leader, you can also have the manager assessment to help you lead your team. Remember, we did the warning earlier that those classifications, when people are missing one or missing two, they are reserved for people that are significantly lacking in the area. And I want to go ahead and share that reminder that no one is perfect. Even a person who is humble, hungry, and smart, they occasionally have a bad day, a bad week, or even a bad time in their life. And again, these are not permanent characteristics. This is just to give you an idea of where are you at as a person, right? How are you feeling as a person on your team? Which one can you improve on and understand? And then if you're leading a team, how can you have those conversations? If someone on your team maybe is not hungry, maybe they have some stuff on their plate that you need to have those conversations about. How can we make it better for them? Because finding that ideal team environment, that team spirit is what's really going to continue to guide you. And one other thing that I wanted, so Joanna, go ahead and put those in the chat. Thank you for doing that. And I also wanted to point out, and I know that we're going to say this at the closing session remark, that my team, employee and organizational development, professional development is so important for us. I can't tell you how passionate the people on that team are to develop leaders, to develop individual contributors, to develop teams. And we are raffling 20 all access passes for our Franklin Covey program. Normally this all access pass is $395. And if you win, you get it for free. If you don't win, you do have to pay the $395, but I will tell you it is 100% worth it. The two trainers that you have are Joanna Van Brocklin, who is the host of the session, and Shauna Nunez, who I know most of you know. And every time she does a session, I always get amazing, amazing feedback on how people like that session. So again, you have some great trainers with that session. I highly encourage you to sign up if you don't win on the raffle prizes. But I do want to open it up for questions. And remember that there is a book, The Ideal Team Player. There's a lot in here. It's really hard to take everything from the book and put it into a short session, but hopefully that gave you an idea of what it means to be an ideal team player and how we can contribute and be ideal team players in our own teams. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Joanne, and then we can open it up for questions. And I do have a question on the chat. When will they draw the winners? We're going to be drawing the winners today at the closing session.
Great question. And thank you so much for your presentation, Alex. I know we've received lots of great feedback in the chat here. Thank you again to everyone joining us from UC Riverside and from our sister campuses. We hope you enjoyed spending your time with us today in this session. As you all know, our goal is to keep the UC Riverside Staff Conference 100% free to attend, and we couldn't do that without the generous support of our sponsors, which include UC Riverside's Staff Assembly, our Leaders of Excellence and Distinction, also known as LEAD, UC Riverside's Human Resources and Employee and Organizational Development Department, and of course, Schools First Credit Union. As a friendly reminder, the conference will be uploaded to UC Riverside Staff Assembly YouTube channel. Few other quick reminders. We have our in-person closing session this afternoon at UC Riverside on campus at 2 p.m. That will be hosted by my colleague, Shauna Nunez. Alex will also be there. So if you are able to join us on site at UC Riverside, please do RSVP to the conference through our Zoom events webpage if you haven't already done so. This, unfortunately, the closing session, since it is in person at UC Riverside, it is only open to UC Riverside staff at this time. Couple other announcements. LEAD nominations for the executive board are now open, so we encourage you to go to the LEAD website and sign up for that. Also, staff assembly elections will open April 14th. I've dropped the link in chat for those who want to place their election votes. Also, signing up for our UCR Employee and Organizational Development listserv. We love sharing what we're offering, our programs, our trainings, new things that we have to help our UC Riverside staff develop and continue growing. So please, if you're not already, join our website. And Alex already mentioned the raffle for our All Access Pass, Franklin Covey All Access Pass. So do definitely sign up for that if you are not one of the lucky raffle winners. It's a great benefit and a great way to continue pursuing your professional development. So with that, thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you in any of our future sessions remaining for today and of course next year. It's been great having everyone join us. So thank you again.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And if anybody has any other questions, I can hang out here for a little bit.
I'm seeing a question from Trina in chat.
Oh, okay, let's see.